Hi, folks, and welcome to another real and raw conversation. This time, the topic, it's a hot topic. Maybe not just this time. I think it's the topics we deal here on a weekly basis. They're always hot because there's so much to go through that we cannot avoid because, you know, a lot of things are misrepresented and we cannot just stay silent. At least that's not our style. So for that purpose, I, with the help of my good friend and co-host Marco, we managed to bring here a fantastic panel composed of five people. So we have full house today. They are all very gifted when it comes to understand the so-called war of information, because war is not only a physical fight, or there's more to that than what you see on the news and the actual battlefield. There is something beyond called the war of information or the war of propaganda, and that's what we're going to discuss it here. And for that purpose, beside Marco, I have Rafael Castro Martinez, who has been with us for a few times. So he's a recurrent figure, and he's back. So that's not a bad sign. We are still patient with his insights. And we have two new guests on Wednesday. We have Virág, who was with me, I think, about a year ago, and I'm happy to have her back. And we have Daniela, Giulia, Traub, who is also based in Israel, like Marco. So this is what we're here for in the next 60 to 90 minutes. So if you are interested, make sure to be around. If you know someone who is not watching, to be good if you can share. And don't be shy. Don't hesitate to use the chat box. It's there for us to make this interactive and dynamic. So let's make it a proper conversation, not just between the five of us, but including yourselves on the other side. If you enjoy what we do here, make sure to press the like button below. And if you haven't subscribed, you can do a massive favor to this channel just by pressing that subscribe button below. So there's a lot to be said, so I'm not going to go much further as of now. I'm going to pass the word to Marco, who will introduce the topic in detail.
Well, this evening we're going to discuss where it all went wrong in terms of Israel's image. Israel has been on the battlefield. It has dominated its enemies, repulsed its enemies, defeated them convincingly. But in the public sphere, in the sphere of public diplomacy, propaganda, in academia, unfortunately, we have been dealing with a very crafty enemy. And we have to accept that fact, and we have to understand how to deal with that, and we have to understand where indeed we went wrong and how we can improve and how we can remedy this situation. And to that end, we have three illustrious guests this evening. And with Dr. Daniela's, Giulia's permission, I'm going to start with you, as you were a diplomat for many years, involved in diplomacy, and indeed you were in some very difficult spots, namely Dublin, Ireland. We did a podcast with a guest from Dublin, Ireland the other day, by the way, Maurice Cohen, who had to speak before the Oireachtas, the Irish Parliament Committee, and indeed one got the distinct impression that it was a setup, that he was involved with a kangaroo court. So Daniela, your analysis of the situation, you come from a very important perspective. You have a very important perspective. What is your analysis of the situation? Because it's not something that began yesterday. I mean, I've been around for a while, and once upon a time when I was young and handsome, and now I'm only handsome, people were more or less, they had a more balanced approach. I mean, I'm talking about 30 or 40 years ago. It wasn't blanket dislike of Israel. People also were quite prepared to express a favorable opinion of Israel. Nowadays, even if they hold that opinion, they are intimidated. What's your analysis of the situation? Where did it go wrong?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me this evening. Great honor to be here.
Pleasure.
I think I'll start. First of all, I'm not a diplomat anymore, so I'm speaking just on behalf of me. I must say that putting anti-Semitism aside and just focusing on Israel's strategy, which just doesn't exist. Israel calls it Hasbara, but it actually is not Hasbara. It's a cognitive warfare. And the social media is a battle zone. Yet, Israel doesn't look at it like that. Nobody in the West look at it like that. Russia does look at it like that. China looks at it like that. Qatar and Iran look at it like that. This is an amazing figure. After the 7th of October, there was about 80% activity on social media in the US campuses that was anti-Israel. They analyzed it and they saw that they were all bots. Bots that were operated by the same countries each time. Once it's bots against let's say Ukraine, the next it's bots against Israel, depending on the cause. But these bots jump from cause to cause that it's, again, anti-West. They analyzed the same thing a year and a half later. And what did they find out? That 80% of the anti-Israel activity were real people, meaning that those 80% bots at the beginning managed to influence the opinion of real people. So while countries like China and Russia and Qatar understand the game and they look at it at a military perspective and they invest millions and millions of dollars into this, Israel doesn't see it this way. They don't invest. They let influencers lead the way. And now influencers are amazing and they're doing amazing work, but they can't lead a strategy. They are just, a part in the game that has to be used against this cause and in this battlefield, but they can't lead it because they aren't a country. They don't have the resources of a country, and they just don't have the strategy or the backing that a country can provide. Yet the West and Israel just don't work in that manner. And that's, in my opinion, putting again aside anti-Semitism that will always be there in the back of our heads. Maybe not that much in the back of our heads anymore, but that will always be there. Putting that aside, Israel, in my opinion, has to bump up the game and start operating as if this is one of the battlefields, as if this is sky or sea. It's just another part of the game that has to be addressed.
Very interesting. Vitor?
Yeah, I would like to ask the same to Virág, especially when it comes to social media, because I think you've been on the field for a good few years. And Daniela touched on something that I think it's something that you mention on your Instagram quite often, which is the influencer presence, how good they are or how bad they are, because I don't think they always are of service.
I agree. And first of all, thank you for having me today. And Daniela, I agree with so many of what you said. And I was taking notes, where I can give still some added value. But I genuinely appreciate your frankness here. I think that is a big problem and a big challenge that Israel is facing. For me, the whole Hasbara is a failed business to start with. So when I, 10 years ago, started to post about Israel as a non-Jewish person, I was immediately labeled as a Hasbarist. I had no idea what the term even meant. And then the more I understood and I saw the whole industry around that, I was like, this is a false policy to follow. This is not the way. The moment you start justifying things, you are already doing a disservice to Israel, because on this notion, you are actually putting Israel on a whole different standards than other countries. No government is perfect. So you don't need a whole Hasbara machinery to actually stand up for your own country's existence. There is tons of Hungarian hatred going out, in the world right now. And I stand my ground as a Hungarian. We don't need a whole strategy to protect our country, because number one, people who wants to hate us, they will hate us. And the same is done with Israel. So I feel influencers and an influencer factor is a double-edged sword. But Victor is mentioning, that I post often about, is what happened after October 7th. Let's be frank. It became a very ugly industry on both ends, both for people who are influencing factors for Gaza and the Palestinian people at large, and the people who are supporting Israel. If you check, both of them are literally using the same narratives, the same wording, the same strategies. The issue, what I'm seeing, is that people, even with good intentions, are doing more harm sometimes than good. Why is that? People who have no credentials and education or experience in the field are playing geopolitical experts, again, on both sides. And so 20 something years old are great at content creation. And today with AI, you can really, really just, push out content within 5 minutes that looks good. It's amazing for 30 to 60 seconds. And I feel like everyone is repeating the same thing. Where is the added value? Number two, social media is absolutely, such as the word of the arts, is left leaning. So we are against, again, a group of people who are not there to listen, but there to get offended. And that's what you see on social media. So here comes the big catch 22. Influencers are getting paid by the algorithm based on views, likes, engagement. What gives you that? The more provocative posts you post, the better your engagement. You don't need to fact check. In fact, the bigger exaggeration you are saying, even if it falls under the category of yellow journalism, it's good for you because you're going to become an influencer factor. And then, if we put the matrix points together, you get follower base. It's very easy to grow on Instagram today if you know what to post. The question is whether you're going to play that game or you keep your integrity. If you keep your integrity, it's going to be a slow growth, but probably you can, I'm going to be harsh, but you can look into the mirror the next day as well. If you're okay to follow what the algorithm needs, you can get 200,000 followers within a couple of months. And the problem is that people still believe that follower base equals credentials and credibility and kind of something of an essence. So what you see them, organizations, especially in New York City, are having galas where these influencers are getting awards and they are the big stars, whereas people who are actually on the field or people who worked in the field for ages, they are not having the platform because the influencers are the ones that are sellable on a flyer or in marketing, brochures. And I think that is already something that the whole country is facing as such, and it's a huge mistake. So I don't want to go into more details, but I think that gives a gist of my opinion about the market, because it is a business market right now and the business model. And it breaks my heart. And again, I need to emphasize that both sides are doing that, but there are big bucks monies are being made out of this war on both sides. And that's just tragic in and of itself.
These are very important insights because obviously most of us are not au fait, certainly of my generation, with what you've been saying just now. So these are powerful insights from Daniela and Virág. Rafael, the problem though starts many decades ago, because Israel, in the sphere of, let's say, Hasbara, this ridiculous word, has been losing the battle for many years. We're talking about decades ago. What is your analysis of the situation, and where did Israel go wrong, and what can it do to get the ship on an even keel, as it were?
I need to apologize because I only have 5 minutes, and I could speak for at least 50 minutes. So let me just focus on two main points. I think the term Hasbara is wrong because it means explaining, and the Jewish people have explained themselves for at least 2,000 years, and it hasn't worked very well. So
Exactly.
I would say I think that what is more needed and urgent are not rational, intelligent, factual arguments, but something which I would label hizdahut, creating self-identification of non-Jews with Israel, with Israelis, with Jews, because it is only when an emotional connection is created that one can really feel the pain and sympathize with what you're going through.
Precisely.
And this is something that the Palestinians have understood a long time ago. They know that the facts are not on their side, so they developed the art of manipulating and arousing emotions wonderfully, and they do it in so many ways that are subtle, elegant, that even the best movie directors would not think of, resorting to.
Indeed, let me just say this, and obviously you'll pick up again. They throw the hysteria bombs very well.
No, but it's not just hysteria. It's just think of these images you see of mothers in Gaza holding their dead children in the arm. For any Christian, especially any Catholic, this reminds you of the Pietà of Michelangelo, of the dead Jesus. And this is obviously something that resonates when the kid has died because of an Israeli weapon.
Well, that's right, but it does generate hysteria, which blocks a real analysis of the situation. They're
but I think
striking an emotive note.
You're right, but labeling hysteria suggests that it's something irrational, impulsive. No, it's very smart. It's very subtle. It's something.
No, quite. Sorry if I just interject. I'm not saying the rationale behind creating the Palisteria, as I call it, is there. It's certainly, absolutely. It's a very subtle operation, because they understand that on a factual basis they don't exist. Okay, so they have to take it to another level.
You're right, but I would really urge everyone in Israel, to stop thinking that Jews and Israelis are smarter than Arabs, because the Palestinians in the field of propaganda are much better than you, and they really pull the right levers, and that is why they're so successful. The second point I would like to raise is that a lot of Hasbara is self-referential. It's like Zionists talking to other Zionists and convincing themselves that they're right, which adds no value, because what's the point of convincing people who already agree with you? There's very little effort to reach the middle ground. And I see so much toxic behavior, when you're in a Facebook discussion and someone asks a question and, just people just call them, oh, you're an anti-Semite and so on. That's counterproductive. And the Arabs don't do it because they're much smarter. In Arabic, they say that those who support Israel are, sellouts, Islamophobes. Indeed. But in English, they're very polite, very tactful. They speak about peace, about freedom, and so on. So, I'm not urging you to be dishonest, but I'm urging you, people involved in Hasbara to really think about how their words come across to people who don't share your perspective to begin with. Certainly. And another thing is,
sorry,
Daniela and Virág mentioned correctly, the lack of basically priority that the Israeli authorities give to this. Virág mentioned the wonderful galas. Great, but I think it would be much more productive in terms of return on investment for a couple of recruits of the army, to send birthday greetings to the thousands of little people that defend Israel on social media. Because just imagine, I get called a whore, a Zionist whore, a mercenary, even though I still haven't received a big buck from the Ministry of Hasbara and the all-powerful Jewish lobby. But this is what people think, that we are in this for the money. Whereas the other side is in it for idealism, whereas reality is the other way around. And we get demoralized, especially because so many of the arguments used against us come from leftist Israelis. So just imagine me called a prostitute, trying to dismantle arguments, refute arguments that come from university professors who, have all the rights and all the privileges of being Israeli. Whereas, I had a Pakistani friend who defended Israel. He stopped when he realized that he was getting continuously confronted by citations by Gideon Levy and by others of his ilk, and he said, why should I draw the attention of the Pakistani Secret Service to defend a state that actually couldn't care less if its own people, are a fifth column? So these are a bit, the frustrations that being an unpaid Hasbarist creates in life, but I think it's important to think about it.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Can I interject 2 points, because you really made my brain work? Like when you said about manipulations, look, what the other side is doing perfectly is that they know that you can't talk facts to heart, to emotions. They know it's emotions to emotions, whereas the Israelis, and I need to tell you, it's also at large conservative or right-wing media and right-wing PR always works like this. We are fact-based. We still think that people are interested in facts. The left-leaning sides and the underdogs always go for emotions. And that is why they could move such a crowd in New York City or in LA and in between because it was about emotions. Nobody cared about the facts, which river, which sea, we all know the cliches at this point. But that is the problem here.
Indeed. Daniela, would you like to pick up on this theme?
Sure. I absolutely agree with the fact that we speak facts and the other side speaks emotions, and it just doesn't work. They also respond faster because the facts just don't matter. So in social media, the name of the game is speed. And if they, just post something, it can be a complete lie, but it really doesn't matter because it resonates with people, and then it's already spread out. And it doesn't matter what Israel will respond because nobody's going to hear it anyway. The story's out there. I also think, though, that it's a matter of numbers, and there are many more Muslims in the world and anti-Israel people than there are pro-Israel and Jews. So we are in a disadvantage there. Yet our strength in Israel is technology, and if we will use that technology on social media, we have all the startups in the world with the best technology, and to utilizate that technology towards this cognitive war, then I think we will be in, I don't know if an advantage, but at least not so much behind. And regarding what you said about the IDF sending out messages to all the pro-Israeli activists around the world. So the IDF isn't involved in it at all. You have a cognitive unit in the IDF, but they deal with enemy states. They don't work in Western states or towards Westerners at all. It's not allowed. So basically, I opened when I was younger, when I was a student, I opened 3 operation rooms that were Hasbara rooms in 2012 and 14, and also in the last war on 7th of October. And we had many volunteers trying to work on social media in order to push the message as much as possible. And we were working in front of the different ministries, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of, what was it, the Hasbara, whatever it was called then. I think now it's closed. And they were approaching us and asking us for help. So there is no strategy in place and no resources, and also the budget doesn't go there. And if the budget goes, let's say, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the people there are career diplomats. They don't know social media. They don't know marketing. They don't know military tactics when it comes to cognitive warfare. So how do you even expect with a big budget for them to operate accordingly? Basically, we're in sort of a loop that Israel isn't managing to get out of. And I agree with you completely. When I was in Dublin, I had some amazing activists, really some of the best activists I've seen in my life. And some of them weren't even Jewish. And I was in awe because they were receiving so much hate, but they were fighting for a state that wasn't their own state. And I tried, as just the small diplomat, to encourage them and to be there for them as much as possible. But in the long run, the Palestinians pay a lot of the people that are pro-Palestinian, and also Iranian money is going in that direction. On the 7th of October, it was a coordinated media effort together with the influencers. They were paid as well. And in Israel, there's no budget. It's not the case. And many of the supporters of Israel do it for a year or 2 or 3 and maybe even 10, but then they run out of energy. And I can absolutely relate to that because it's exhausting to fight windmills.
Thank you. So Marco, can I just highlight one other thing? Because based on everything Daniela said, I think we have just completely refuted the notion that, Israel has a diabolic intelligence,
Perhaps. That's a podcast for another time. Israel and the occult. Daniela, I just want to raise a little polemical note here. Perhaps there is a sector of the state which wasn't as interested as perhaps as we are, as stating some unpleasant truths about those who were once called our peace partners. That's my sensation, having frequented certain circles. that they weren't convinced that we were, let's say, use this abused term, on the right side of history. Now, they very often represented, I mean, very often they were very conciliatory towards our ostensible peace partners, and what is perceived in the international arena is a state which has won a war, but which is prepared to give back what it has won. But if I were a non-Jew and a non-Israeli, I'd be thinking, what's the good of a thief giving back half of what he's stolen? This is very often the image that Israel projected. So I think beyond social media, there is something else that is amiss. What are your views? It's let's say in a way, Israel set itself up for failure. Basically, it's unprecedented in the history of war for a winning side to return half of what it won legitimately in defense of war. If you look at the broad sweep of history, the Germans lost huge swathes of territory. The same happened to Italy. The whole of Eastern Europe was reconfigured, and yet Israel is with this wishy-washy policy of making concessions. It doesn't really strike something. It seems feckless.
I agree with that, but the thing is that the Israelis really want peace. They want to live in a quiet state in which you don't worry if you're going to live tomorrow or die. And that, I think, is a human wish, and that's deep in us to want a better future. And you start telling yourself that also the other side wants that, and you ignore the facts that are in front of you, that maybe the other side isn't wishing what you're wishing. So I can understand in the 90s where people really thought that the Oslo Accords can bring peace because they were wishful and they were hopeful. But yet again and again and again, Israel, put out their hand for peace, and they received death from the other side, and suicide bombers and attacks and terrorists. And then I think there was a huge awakening on the 7th of October. Not everybody, but a lot of people, and also speaking about Jewish identity, if Jews, a lot of the secular Jews, saw themselves as people of the world, they didn't see themselves as Jews first. They maybe were Israelis, maybe Jewish, but they saw themselves as people of the world. Yet the 7th of October and the reaction of the world to the 7th of October that wasn't pro-Israel showed them that maybe they're not citizens of the world, maybe they're Jews first. And that's a huge thing that's wakening up inside a lot of secular Jews today. Now, Israel is a democracy. There will be many views here, and it's good. Israel should always be a democracy and always allow other voices, even if those voices are not, just harmful to Israel. That's just the case, and that will always be the case in a democracy. Yet, the gear today is in the hands of a government that does believe that we have the right to this land. But they're still not focusing on the international arena at all. So the fault lies, in my opinion, let's look at how beautifully the attack on Iran was conducted, yet it was not backed at all with social media presence or any tactics on that area. I mean, and it can be done, but that is completely left aside, and that is on the government, not on the people that are calling against Israel or Israelis that are anti-Israel. And I'll pass it on to somebody else because I've really hugged the mic. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Hog away. Vitor.
Yeah, I want to say something here. So I want to dismantle urban legend that they say Jews are in charge of everything. So there is this whole myth that Jews are in charge of the stock market. Jews are in charge of the media. Jews are even in charge of something called adult content that I don't know what it is because I'm too much of an innocent person, but maybe you can help me with that. Basically, Jews control the whole planet and maybe the whole galaxy. But if that's the case, how come we are winning the war? If we are in control, if we dictate the rules, if we tell what to do, and if we are, telling this is the direction, this is what to want to achieve, how come we keep failing? If we are in charge, we shouldn't fail. I mean, we could fail from time to time, but it seems that Jews have been controlling the media for decades, at least since I remember. I think even in my childhood, there was already this thing that Jews are going to tell you what's going on in the road, and if you disobey, there will be an issue because you need to say yes, sir. And then there is also this thing that people are sure that Jews are in control because they dig on the on the organization's board, and there is a name that resembles a Jewish surname. So if it's finished in Berg, it must be Jewish, and sometimes it's just German. It must be Jew and evil, not only Jew. If it's Jew, it's evil, and it's preparing us for the worst. So I think people should reflect, because there's some sort of paradox of being in charge and continuously losing. So how can we go about telling individuals and the masses in this case, because this is a global issue, it's not about individuals here and there, that Jews are not in charge, and if they were, they shouldn't be humiliated by the media. Do you have any strategy, any approach that you would like to share? Maybe Rafael?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to disagree with you. It's indeed true that some Jewish newspapers are Jewish-owned and evil. Look at Haaretz, for example. So, I can also think of the New York Times. So it's just not the kind of evil Jews that the anti-Semites think they are, but there are evil Jewish newspapers, and we all suffer a lot because of them. I have often said that Haaretz for Hamas is worth more than an entire battalion of Nukba fighters, because it basically demoralizes Israelis and riles the West against the Jewish state. Now, this question is not so much about Hasbara, but about anti-Semitism. And I have to say that, the anti-Semite is not really receptive to logical arguments, because he's not looking for reasons not to hate Jews. He's looking for reasons to hate Jews. So whatever information, true or false, will be framed and absorbed in a way that confirms what he sets out to believe in the first place. And, you can laugh about it. I think that humor is a beautiful Jewish weapon that the Jewish people developed precisely in order to cope with so much hatred. It's much harder to hate people that make you laugh. So, for example, there was this movie, Don't Mess with Zohar. I think that was wonderful, like Hasbara. But ultimately, all this fear of Jews comes because, objectively speaking, Jews are very peculiar people. You can say it's special, you can say strange, peculiar, but it's different for many historical, religious, sociological, and other reasons. And since both in Christianity and in Islam, we have this idea of the devil that is both visible and invisible, both weak and almighty, both tempting and seductive. The Jewish people, in a way, are very easily associated with something scheming, shady, dangerous, similar to the devil. And in the Muslim world, it's even more so, because if the weak and punny Yahud are able to defeat all Muslim armies, either Allah is on their side or the shaitan is on their side. And if you're a devout Muslim, what are you happier to believe? So, I mean, I think that if anyone gets the formula to heal anti-Semitism, I really think that both the Israel Prize and the Nobel Peace Prize are far too little for this achievement.
There is a comment here from Neshika that I would like to bring to the table, and maybe Virág, since you are based in the States, I think you'll be the right person to comment. So Neshika is saying Zohan, not Zohar. He is the guy running for the New York majority. Lol.
It could be a slogan, from Zohar to Zohan. What happened to New York City in 30 years?
That's definitely a good one. Look, on anti-Semitism, I just want to chip in on something that I try to emphasize, that there are different types of anti-Semitism. There is the one that comes from ignorance, which, for example, I think is generally a thing in Eastern Europe. That comes from the stereotypes, Jews rule the world, but it manifests themselves in verbal abuse towards the Jewish communities and Jewish jokes. And I'm not trying to minimize that, but that is something you can change. And I think eventually, as the time passes, we can educate people on that false narrative that they grow up with. And when you come to Eastern Europe, it has a lot of reason why anti-Semitism exists even after the Shoah in Eastern European, post-Soviet, post-communist countries. So we don't have the time to go into that many people don't understand the nuances there. But the most dangerous form of anti-Semitism is the one that's ideologically driven, because that you can't change. That's literally being indoctrinated into people right now. That is what you see in the US, and that comes from the Muslim world. That comes with that education that they are instilling in Columbia and Harvard and you name it. This is why they were so, reluctant to even hear the facts. And what happened on October 7th, according to this group of people, was done by Israel itself. So it's not like, anti-Semitism is only manifesting itself in like Jews rule the world. No, they legit believe that Israel committed October 7th, so then they can fight in Gaza. So in order to believe that, I think it's almost beyond the level of hatred. You really need to turn off your cognitive, checks and balances and go with that thought. But this is a huge problem. And just a little bit, I want to go back into, I think, I don't know who mentioned, maybe Rafael, about the reflection that we need to reflect. I mean, that's like an advanced level of request from people today. Today's society is literally on a 3-second attention span, and they don't want to hear more than that. Nobody wants to take accountability for anything. And here I will, connect it to the Zohar connection. The guy who is running for a mayor in New York City is someone who 8 months ago was literally nowhere. 8 months later, he is a household name. If anyone would spend 2 seconds on the policies that he's suggesting, you would understand that that's not possible. Like, he is literally trying to, hand over a Marxist socialist setup. Show me one country that it worked out so well, number one. Now, only an American would believe that, honestly. So only Americans can be bought by the term like socialism and communism. This guy is offering free buses, this and that. They're going to pay your rent. I mean, whoever believes that lives in La La Land. And this guy, beyond the fact that he is selling a utopian dream, it's not the problem that he's a Muslim. The problem is that he is an ideologically driven Muslim, meaning his first thing was that if he is a mayor, if Netanyahu comes to New York, he's gonna arrest him. First of all, someone should break the news to him that he has no jurisdiction over that. But this is one of his most important factor in his campaign. I live in Brooklyn, and the people who are putting out the Zoran signs on their windows are the people who also have the Palestinian flag or the LGBTQ signs out there. Anyone in their right mind would see the cognitive dissonance in this circle of three, and yet his voting base is that group. So, I don't want to talk more about that because
you raise a very good point. No, you raise a the cognitive issue we have actually spoken about before, and what I maintain is that Palestinism is a neuronicidal disease. It destroys the neurons, and the cognitive processes go up the spout, as it were.
Yeah. I would like to, defend your neighbors, Virág, because, if your only access to reality in the world is the New York Times or CNN, you can believe that Islamist feminists, that, there's a lot of beautiful homosexual literature in Persian, Muslim Persia, and so on. I personally remember reading hundreds of articles about jihadism, but it really didn't resonate until I entered the premises of the Faculty of Islamic Studies in East Jerusalem and saw a big poster of a Hamas fighter, and that's when, I realized what hundreds of books were never able to make me understand. So sometimes you need to experience things. And unfortunately, October 7 was that Eureka moment for so many Israelis who, read Haaretz and knew nothing about people living 50, 60 kilometers away from them. And,
But people,
returning to, yeah.
experiencing it firsthand, I full-heartedly agree with you. But look at it. Most of the terrorist attacks in Europe, 90%, are committed by jihadists. We have seen examples for that also in the US. So Daniela said, that it's the left side, lefties in Israel are trying, not believing what they are saying. But it's not only them, it's literally the international platform. Hamas had said categorically, vocally, publicly, that Jews are the first, then the West is the next. So what else do you want? Don't you see what's going on in Syria with the Druze? What they are committing is also the copy paste of October 7th. So
It's
but remember
not only Syria.
Let Daniela come in.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Daniela.
So
Go ahead, Daniela.
it's not only Syria. It's not only Syria. It's also the Congo. It's also Sudan. And you don't, and this is happening in the last 2-3 years, and you don't see any other protest. And let's go back in history. If you read about the Kishinev pogrom, you see that it's exactly the same like October the 7th. And you read about the pogrom and the Inquisitions and the Holocaust, and you see again and again the same ideology. Today it's called the Palestinian cause. Then it used to be called Nazism, and so on and so forth. And for me, it's just a way to hate Jews. Now, speaking about the extreme left wingers, I do believe that some of them really just want to believe something. It's a lot of time with the ideology of the left. It's how they want to see the world and not pragmatism of how it actually is, where that you can find more in the right. But on the other hand, there are left wingers that are anti-Semitic. That they do just probably, and that's the only explanation for such extreme hatred towards themselves and their own people, is that they just dislike themselves and their nation. That's my only explanation. But again, not all left wingers, and there are a lot of Zionist left wingers, and it's important to say that a lot of opinions is important to create a stable and strong society, and silencing a side isn't a good thing. Yet I agree with you completely that a lot of the extreme left are just helping Hamas and helping Iran, and it's just extremely disappointing, knowing as my brother risked his life in Gaza and came back. He lived in London, and he came to Israel to fight on the 7th of October. I've been in reserve duty, and I didn't risk my life like he did, but many of my people have been risking their lives. And then hearing people just smother all over Israel, them being Jews and Israelis, it's just heartbreaking for me, at least.
For sure.
I think we also have to blame academia, because they created a completely invented distinction between Islam and Islamism. It's as if, historians would talk about Bolshevism as in to Leninism, or Nazism in opposition to National Socialism. Everything that is nasty is Islamism. Everything that is cute and is beautiful is Islam. So you have people believing that Islam is a wonderful religion because, Islam is basically, Eid al-Fitr, the cute kids, saying, that's smiling at them when they go to the neighborhood shop. I have to say that Muslims have wonderful interpersonal skills. There's rarely an interaction with a Muslim where that is not wonderful, as long as you don't touch politics and religion. So it's very tempting for people to buy this belief that Islam is wonderful and only Islamism is the problem. Secondly, Daniela, I really sympathize and empathize, with what you feel, but I would really ask you and all Jews to make an effort to understand and not project your own values and your own perspective onto others. So, for example, it is true that from a Jewish perspective, Kishinev and October 7th is the same. But I don't think that a Moldovan nowadays feels that he is any way related to, someone in Deir el-Balah. And this is also important for Hasbara, because when I, lamented the fact that so much of Hasbara is basically an argument, this technique of explaining things and treating the issue as a law case is, a result of the Jewish mindset, which shaped by countless generations of the Beit Midrash, of Talmudic discussions, where you can rationally debate things, and at the end, everyone will agree on a truth that is based on facts. Most nations don't have this Talmudic tradition, so what really works are emotions. What really works are sentiments, and this is something that needs to be taken into account, because you're not trying to convince fellow Jews; you're trying to convince people with a very different cognitive and psychological constitution. A small example, which I think shows where that it's not a dichotomy. You don't have to choose between emotions and facts. You can blend them intelligently very well. We all know that infamous four maps of the land of Israel, where the green Palestinian spots become smaller and smaller until they resemble Indian reservations in North America. I've seen these maps refuted by very intelligent, knowledgeable historical arguments, which only people who are well informed, with an IQ of 120, understand. What would be a more successful approach to refute and defeat this map? To have the same four maps, but showing the population of Christians and Jews throughout the Muslim world in the last 100 years, and how it's basically shriveled up and only grown in Israel. And that is something that would both be factual and also create identification and sympathy on the side of all Christians who should really understand that Jews and Israelis are fighting their battle, and that Israel is the front line of battles that soon we're going to also see in Rome and Paris and Brussels and even in New York City.
Rafael, I would like to comment what you just said when it comes to approach Christians. I wish it was that easy, because I know you live in Berlin, and you know that most churches are empty, at least in Western Europe. So it's not that simple to try to approach the Christian community these days, because they are shrinking and they are losing identity. They don't know who they are. I'm not saying we should give up, but they are not that interested. I think they are too busy with what they see on social media, on the internet, so they don't have really the time, to alternative interactions.
Yeah, Vitor, you raise a very good point, and in fact, the shrinking of the Christian world and the de-Christianization of Europe has opened up the way for the phenomenon which we see now, because any Bible reading person, anybody au fait with the Bible, would clearly understand the fictitious nature of Palestinism. So the lack of a sense of identity has opened the way. And in fact, as I said on numerous occasions, Palestinism has weakened the immune system of Europe. I call it the retrovirus of jihadism, because people had a romantic view of jihadism, because this is essentially what Palestinism is. It is a way of weaseling its way into European societies and creating a phony narrative. And people don't have the instruments to deal with it. They don't have the critical sense to deal with it and to dismantle it. Comments?
I'd like to say something. I also teach at a public school in Berlin, and it's very interesting to notice that in schools with a lot of Muslim students, suddenly, non-Muslim students start wearing crosses, even though they're not, particularly religious. So I think that at a deeper level, all Europeans feel Christian, at least culturally. And in fact, my belief is that the reason the Christian churches, including the Catholic Church, are so supportive of Muslim immigration is because they think that by putting in a foreign religion and people who are very religious Muslims, they will basically catalyze a reawakening of Christian faith in Europe. That's the only explanation, because otherwise, it would be of absurd and criminal stupidity to support the immigration policies the way the Catholic Church has done, and also the evangelical churches in Germany have done.
I want to push back on that. I don't think they supported it for that reason. They supported it for humanitarian reasons, especially the previous Pope. He was big on that, and he fell into the the trap of our binary world that we see today, meaning you have the rich white people and the poor people of color. This is how most people are looking at the world. And this is why also the European Union was pushing. I mean, first and foremost, places like Germany or Belgium, they needed a workforce, something that the Eastern Europeans didn't need. And by the time they understood that they are not only getting a workforce, they also get an imported ideology that is not compatible with our Western society, it was too late, meaning right now, 10 years after the influx of the immigrants. So I believe it was more on that side as a human that, we should not let them suffer. And there is this fine line between this and also understanding that, yes, some people are trying to enter to Europe as actual refugees. They are trying to have a decent life. But then there is another group who didn't come to Europe for that reason. There is a very heavily loaded group of people, primarily young men, who didn't come for a better life. And that is something we also see in the United States, where this whole visa situation is now, in the news every day. But it cannot be that right now there is a narrative in the US that the illegal immigrants coming from Latin America or other areas are the righteous ones because they are people who just want to do better. And anyone who is white is automatically privileged, and hence we can be legal. And this is the same narrative that people have been using on the street vis-a-vis October 7th and Israel. They look at Israel / the Jewish people as the white, rich colonizers. The Gazans are the poor, quote unquote, people of color, the underdog. And this disadvantage is already putting every narrative or every, quote unquote, the Hasbara system at a very challenging position. Because Jews are never looked at as a minority group, not even in America. Jews are always the rich ones. Every other minority group could fight for their equality in a sense that look at what Black Lives Matters achieved, regardless of my opinion on the organization of Black Lives Matters. But they achieved that today, you say one bad word against a Black person, you are immediately racist. If you say anything, really a blatantly anti-Semitic sentence against a Jew, it still needs context. It is not automatically anti-Semitism. They're gonna mishmash it with anti-Israelism, or it's only anti-Zionism. So the biggest problem that I think we face today is this binary looking at the world, that whoever is white is automatically privileged. So this is like my 2 cents on this immigration.
I agree with you. I do think there is sort of awakening. Maybe it's too late. I can't tell. But of, let's say, France and Britain thinking of shipping back Syrians. And that lays a very big problem with Giulia now, because they really wanted him to be sort of a good guy, or to view him as a good guy. The normalization was also part of that, normalizing Giulia, in order for them to kick out as many refugees as possible to save what's left from Europe. Now that Giulia went and butchers the Druze, you see 2 things. First, as if it just didn't happen, because they can't let this stop their plan of getting them out. And if you do look at it, they just don't know what to do with it anymore, because they're like, okay, if we kick them back, we again are the bad guys. So they're in, this loop that they're just not being able to get out of. And I do believe that Europe is in a very big trouble. I don't know if it will manage to survive this exchange of populations that occurred in the last 20, 30 years.
I just want to correct you on one sentiment that I'm very sensitive about. Is not Europe, is Western Europe. There is a huge gap between, in this regard, East and West. And look at all.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I want to mention it because it just shows so clearly the difference, even regarding anti-Semitism. Like Eastern European countries, or I can talk to Mike about my country, Hungary, we didn't have pro-Palestinian protests for many reasons, but we did not during the last 2 years. And so the differences between those people who invited these ideologies / cultures and the other side is palpable, and the statistics and the facts talk for themselves.
Yeah, just to Virág's point, let me just share one story here, because I lived in Hungary and I currently live in Ireland, and things are very different when it comes to fearing some things you have at home. Like you can see, I have a Hanukkah just behind me. That's fine. That's fine, because most Irish people don't know what it is. So that's fine. I keep it there all the time.
Yeah.
But in my bedroom, that I'm not going to show you because that's very private, I have an Israeli flag. Okay. Now, when I'm away, or when myself and my girlfriend are away, as we know, I have a cat, and you can see that. You can see him. You can see the portrait with me there somewhere on my back. So when we are away, we need to hire a so-called cat sitter, and we have two cat sitters. We have the Brazilian, who is evangelic, and they have no issue keeping the Israeli flag, because I know she's a big fan of the Holy Land. And we have an Irish, and I don't know who is she. She has always been professional. She always did the job, but I don't know her political beliefs. I don't know her views on the Middle East, or if she has any. But just to be safe, I always remove the flag. Now, when I lived in Hungary, it never ever occurred to me to remove the Israeli flag. And people will say, but look at the history, look at the Shoah, look at all that. Yeah, but that was a couple of generations ago. I'm aware of it. But I wouldn't fear at all if a Hungarian cat sitter would come to look after my cat when I'm away, whether I'm in Hungary or in Ireland, because that's not the case. And then people criticize Fidesz and Hungarian government for being racist and xenophobic and anti-Semitic. They don't know what they're talking about. They probably
Vitor, excuse me. They do know what they're talking about, in the sense that they're pernicious. They're misrepresenting the truth. They deliberately misrepresent things. And this is what I wanted to get back to something. You mentioned Eastern Europe, which still has a traditional conception of reality, and the European Union. And I think we have to try to understand something about the European Union. And it is my humble opinion that the European Union is the most anti-European organization in the world. And I think it reflects itself in the treatment of the Jews, because the Jews are an exception in the sense that they've always maintained their national identity. And the European Union is essentially about dissolving national identity, and this is reflected in the literature, and especially in the material in schools that the didactic material that is generated. Some thoughts on that?
I generally think the European Union as an idea was great back then. It just got overstretched. They couldn't stop at the economical and financial collaborations, and I do believe that the European Union is a threat for sovereignty and national identities and cultures, so much so that I actually wrote my bachelor thesis on this topic. But it was so close to our accession to the European Union that no supervisor wanted to accept my topic.
Nobody wanted to touch it.
Yes. So eventually I found one journalist and one real big thought leader in Hungary who accepted that. And today, 10, 15 years later, we can talk about it. It's really scary. So I do believe they are a threat. I do believe that the governments, Poland, Hungary, and even Croatia, even though their leadership is not necessarily, aligned with our government, but they are trying to sustain that. And when you turn off social media and you talk to the people on the street, most of them understand the threat. So this is also just a little bit going back to the reality that social media is not the mirror on our whole society. Daniela mentioned, the quantity of the bots and things and AI, and it's not the reality. And people really need to remind themselves sometimes, turn off your phone for 4 days, you're going to face a whole different reality by talking to the people on the streets.
Right. What I just like to add one thing before I hand back the floor, as it were. I'm firmly convinced that the EU and many other Western countries which think in the same terms are a pernicious actor. They are effectively at war with Israel on many levels. Their media, their academia embolden our enemies.
Yeah. I would like to make a point related to what Virág said. It's true. And this difference between Western Europe and Eastern Europe is due to the fact that traditionally Jews in Eastern Europe were seen as a nation primarily, whereas in Western Europe they were seen as a religion. So it's far easier for Eastern Europeans to see that Zionism as the national movement of a nation than for the Western Europeans who think that suddenly, a religious community decided to establish some sort of theocracy in the middle of, of the Middle East.
Right. Sorry, Rafael, but I'd like to remind you that the European Union understand that Israel is a nation, and that's the problem. That is why their ethos is an anti-nation state ethos, and they see in Israel a paragon of nationhood.
I don't think they're intelligent enough to have an ideology. I think that they're not accountable, so they have a lot of money and can do anything they want to do. They want to play a role. So if you see, the dynamics of European diplomacy, you'll always realize that European policy is somewhere between, in any conflict, somewhere between America and either China, America, or the Arab world. And in the end, they're dishonest with everyone because they don't take a line. They waffle all the time. And I remember a sad incident in which I wanted to go to Bethlehem and organize a camel safari for my family. And I talked to this, Arab tour operator, and he gave me an exorbitant price. And I emailed him and I said, I worked 2 years in an NGO in the West Bank, and dishonest people like you are what make your country, your people so poor and unsuccessful. And he replied with something that was actually very true. He said, "You, as a European, have nothing to lecture me about, because the European Commission funds the whole entire kleptocracy of the Palestinian Authority. So don't lecture me about ethics and morality, please."
I want to pick on something that Marco mentioned,
Sorry,
if you don't mind. I don't. Do you want to add something to this topic, Daniela, before I move on?
Just maybe on the point of maybe something that can help, and I think that President Trump is going in that direction. And I'm going to speak just a moment about the normalization. Syria isn't really the matter. I'm picking up on what I said before. Syria really isn't the matter here, and the matter is actually Saudi Arabia and the coalition of the Sunni states against not only Iran but also Russia and China. And the meaning of it is he aims to build not only railways but also a gas and oil pipe going through from the Gulf states through Israel, through Syria, Jordan, and up to Europe, and then disconnecting Europe from Russia and China. Okay, so you can only do that through Israel and the Gulf states. That may help making Europe less dependent on the Arab money, and therefore also less dependent on China and Russia. And maybe we'll see a tilt in strategy. Maybe. Again, anti-Semitism is so rooted, and also what you spoke about anti-nation, that is all, I agree completely. So I don't know if there is a remedy for this, but as we see in history, anti-Semitism goes up and down in waves. So I do hope that after the victory now against Iran, it will decline at least a bit. Don't know if I'm hopeful. I can just wish for it.
We all need the hope. So I like that you share that.
Right. Let me pick on something that Marco said, which is the enemy among us. So Marco referred the European Union as an enemy of Europe. I would fully subscribe that opinion, although I can see some positive sides, but maybe the current state of the institution is not the most positive for us Europeans based in Europe. But let's move this concept and apply it to the Jewish people. I think we also have some enemies among us, and they are powerful. And I think the biggest name is this old man called, and Virág, forgive him for my pronunciation, Giulia Soros. I tried my best Hungarian in front of you.
That's a hard one, but it would be György
Yeah,
Soros. Yes.
yeah. Okay. But I tried my best. So yeah, he's still around. If it's not him, it's his tentacles. I would like to get your thoughts on this. Virág as a Hungarian, and I know Rafael, you had some dealings with the organization. If you are able to disclose those, and of course, Daniela, you are also free to add your input.
Ideologically,
Rafael,
I hate.
Go ahead.
Ideologically, I hate Mr. Soros just as much as any of us. But I owe him my family because I worked 2 years in an NGO. He paid my salary, but instead of writing pretty useless reports, I chatted with my then girlfriend, now wife. So my 3 children are basically I owe to him and to his budgets. And actually, it's the only constructive thing that came out from that NGO. Basically, my family. Because
every cloud has a silver lining.
Yes, but I have to say one thing, because I really think that for all the evil that Soros has done, I really do think that sort of pushing this narrative that everything he's involved in everything nefarious is sort of like what was done 100 or 200 years ago with the Rothschild family. It's feeds on very nasty stereotypes, and it's very interesting because there's an article, I believe, on the New York Times or the Washington Post describing how the idea to turn Soros into a campaign issue in Hungary was actually the idea of a gay American Jew who said, Orban, you have no issues. People will not be mobilized to come to vote for you. So you need to find an enemy. And he said, look, Soros is the enemy you need, because if you whip up hatred against him, people will come out and make you win the elections. And it succeeded once and twice. And then everyone else realized that Soros could be made into bogeyman responsible for all the evil in the world. Now, I'm not saying he's not evil. He is evil. But, let's be realistic about how much evil he can do. I think that there are other people like Putin, like Al Jazeera, that are infinitely more toxic than anything Soros has done, does, or will ever do.
So just to clarify, Hungary didn't make Soros the scapegoat and the enemy. He was the enemy of many countries and the global platform way before Hungary started to say his name out loud. And there is something very tragic, actually, since we are talking about narratives, antisemitism, that because of the campaign against Soros from Hungary, we were labeled an anti-Semitic country, starting from the ADL and other platforms. It's false, and I tell you why. Soros was never named as he, the Jew, does this and that. We just said he, as Soros, does this and that. He's also Hungarian. So on the same merit, the whole campaign was anti-Hungarian as it was anti-Semitic. The fact that he is a Jew, let's be frank and let's be, morally honest here, there are rotten apples among Jews as well. So he is one of the rotten apples. So he was never called out for being a Jew. He was called out for being a bad person for our country. And in terms of what he is doing, I never try to tell people what to believe, but I want to encourage people to think. It's very, very easy to see which nonprofits are financed by Open Society and other nonprofits of Soros. It's really easy to do the digging. It takes a lot of time, but you can find it out for yourself. So when, in America especially, I meet people from the left side, vehemently Jewish people who are protecting Soros, that's when I kind of need to take a deep breath and go into my Zen Buddhist master, because that is being blind. Just because he's Jewish and he had supported some good causes also in his life, at the end of the day, you walk into the UN and you check the anti-Israel NGOs operating in the UN with big, actually, power in their hands. Most of them are financed one way or another from the money of the Soros and his foundations. So he is absolutely there in the fight against dehumanizing and delegitimizing Israel. And he himself, again, people can argue what his role was in the Holocaust. I don't care that he was 16. If anyone is watching the 60 Minutes show from the past, he doubled down. He said even today he would do the same as he acted in the Shoah, because he just wanted to protect himself. So the reason this is important, because as a non-Jew, we get so many times, especially as Hungarians, how we didn't help the Jews or how we are not helping the Jews. after knowing this story, it's like the audacity to put us on the radar when a Jewish person himself says that even today he wouldn't help. He would only help himself, and he would be okay to act as a couple. Then the moral high ground is a little bit lost there, but that's like a whole different topic. But so Soros for me is not an enemy, obviously, because he's Jewish. He's an enemy simply because of the acts, what he is doing, and where his money is channeled into. He is behind most of the illegal immigration influx into Europe, and that is a proven fact. It's just, what it is.
Virág, I have two questions. First of all, how is what the Open Society Foundation does any different from what the Ford Foundation, USA?
Nothing.
Okay. And secondly, if Soros, instead of being Jewish, were Greek or Armenian, do you think he would have become an icon of, toxic danger for all of humanity? I really don't think so.
No, you got a good point there. I understand, that there is definitely more of a trigger in the fact that he is Jewish. I don't deny that for a second. From the Hungarian perspective, what I want to say, though, is that what I mentioned, that the campaign was misread purposefully, just to project us or picture us as the anti-Semites, whereas it was never the intention. And that was never in the narrative. But again, I'm not denying of what you're saying.
I have to say another thing to defend Hungary, that Orban was actually very reluctant to accept the advice of the American Jewish American campaign advisor. He didn't want to start the war against. He didn't want to turn Soros into a campaign issue. But the gay American liberal Jew, by the way, told him do that, and it will work, and it worked.
I will check on that. It triggers my.
I'll send you the article. I'll retrieve it.
Please.
Who is that guy? Can you tell the name, Rafael?
I'll retrieve the article. It was in one of the big magazines. It was either Foreign Affairs, something. I'll retrieve it and send it to everyone.
I'm going to go to the source. I'm going to ask my people in Hungary who were close to the campaign whether that was true or not.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole episode on Hungary here, and I want to share a story here that will dismantle the idea that Hungary is living under a dictatorship. So I moved to Hungary in 2016, I remember, or 2015, I can't remember, 15 or 16. And people said, oh, you have to be careful, because of your skin color, your nose, your accent. No, you just have to be careful because they are nasty and they hate everyone that is not Hungarian. So just look around because they might just beat you up. That was never the case. And just the first thing I noticed when I arrived to Hungary, there were plenty of billboards mocking Viktor Orban. I don't know if you remember those Virág in 2015-16, when there was a portrait of Orban with a priest behind him, just telling that he's a saint, because Fidesz has a coalition with a small Christian party, and the whole thing was to dismantle the idea that Orban is a Christian man. He is just there, let's say, for the optics. Now,
he was named everything, and that is a whole study, both for Israel, actually, just to take away a little bit from the Hungarian attention here, but how when the right is criticized, it's always attacking the character in a very hateful manner. When the left is critiqued, it's more about the actual policy or like showing disappointment in them, but it's not hate driven. It's towards the right centrist and right wingers
because they are good people. We all know they are very good people. Their heart is full of honey, and that's why.
Vitor, can I ask a question to Daniela?
Of course, yeah. Go ahead.
Daniela, is your startup going to revolutionize Hasbara?
Well, no, I'm actually currently working on my own startup, and it deals with writing, because I'm an author, and we're creating a platform for writers. So nothing to do with Hasbara. I used to be very active in that world, but I understood that it amounts to nothing, and it's just extremely frustrating. So my energy is going to more productive things like money. So yeah,
I'm interested.
You
in writing.
You Jews are all the same.
So I'm interested.
Yeah, all
Where
the
do I
Jews
sign
are
up?
the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do I sign up?
Excuse me.
No, I'm saying I'm interested. I'm a writer. I love money. So where do I sign up for that?
Well, I get the money, you use the platform, so
That's fine. Okay.
Daniela,
That's how it starts.
Daniela,
That's how it starts.
yeah.
to say you're doing literary Hasbara sounds better than being a money-grubbing author, you know?
Better marketing.
That's true. It's
ploy,
all
better
about
marketing.
how you phrase it. In the
Yeah.
end, that's how it is. Marketing.
I'm actually enjoying this evening too much, you know? I think we should meet again sometime soon.
We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when.
Inshallah.
Unfortunately, you know, like since Ireland was mentioned, you know, we have kneecap coming to the Siget Festival. I don't know. Can you guys just deal with them a little bit, like the Irish band? You know, it's so tragic, and it's I don't understand why.
Yeah, they're a disgrace. They're a disgrace, Virág. Like, if it wouldn't be Hungary, I would just say stay there and don't come back. But I love Hungary too much to say that.
But I'm just
if it would be some other country, some Kazakhstan or whatever, with all the respect for Kazakhstan, they could just stay there because I fucking hate them. Sorry for cursing, but I have no respect for these guys whatsoever. And it's not just about their characters; their music is absolute crap. I know, because I try to set aside the politics and see maybe they have some talent when it comes to music. No, zero. Absolutely.
You know, it's like it's so hard sometimes because you have Roger Waters. I happen to like The Wall a lot. And since I know his stand and his politics and how, you know, ugly he can be, I'm like having a hard time listening to The Wall without, come on, you're betraying your cause. And then I was like, no, I can just listen to that. So it's so bad that we mishmash, you know, everything. And I wish artists could just stay artists.
Who is behind Siget, Virág? I'm interested. Is
private company, but there is a whole pressure on them to cancel kneecap. I think they are enjoying the PR they are getting out of it, to be honest. But there is a whole group of people, actually a mix of Jews and non-Jews, who already started, first of all, an open letter. And also they were at Siget and protesting the presence of kneecap. And also one of our ministers, who is also responsible for fighting antisemitism at the EU, he sat down with Siget and reminded them about, you know, the Hungarian policies and things. Obviously, it's freedom of speech to let them in. Once they pull a stand on the stage, and that's going against our policies, meaning you can't publicly vocalize your support for a terrorist organization, Hezbollah or Hamas, then there can be consequences of their actions. But until then, obviously, it's a freedom of expression.
Yeah, I'm quite curious to see what will be the Hungarian reaction, like when it comes to public and spectators. I'm quite curious to see, and I'm also keen to see how wild are they going to present themselves in stage. Maybe they'll be low profile because it's not exactly their territory. But these guys are not clever, so everything is possible. You know, they are idiots.
I mean,
So
as well, how much they gained from Coachella, you know, it's like, let's not forget that the fact that they pulled out a Palestinian flag literally gained them so many followers, and they are losing gigs, yes, but they are also gaining a lot because of their stunt. And that's...
And, you know, I'd also like to point out the very successful Hasbara of Saudi Arabia, because for decades, they spent billions of dollars building mosques and training extremist imams. Now they've realized that there's a much cheaper and more successful tack. They paid the best soccer players to go there, play in the desert. And these players start, you know, on Twitter and Instagram, posting Quranic surahs. Eventually they will convert, because which football player doesn't like 4 beautiful wives? And, you know, soon you'll have hundreds of thousands of young people all over the world, becoming Muslim because Ronaldo, whatever player in Saudi Arabia, you know, has been lured by the Saudis to play there.
But Rafael, I don't think Ronaldo needs to move to Saudi Arabia to have 4 wives. Huh? I think he can have 4 wives in every single country with all the fame and reputation he has. He doesn't need the Saudis for that. Huh?
But remember that Muslim men can have not just 4 wives, but a whole harem, so it's still better.
Yeah.
I do think you have to look like with extreme awe at the Muslim states such as let's say the UAE and Saudi Arabia that understood the power of soft power, and they invest so much in sports and in culture and bringing people there in order to advance the name and to market their name. And a lot of people, especially Israel, still doesn't know how to do that so well. I researched the UAE as part of my PhD, and I'm just what an amazing country when it comes to their PR stance and their marketing. It's just phenomenal. From where they were in the 70s, where they are today, it's just a completely different world.
What a fascinating topic to research. Good for you. I like that.
It's worthy
Maybe
of a
that could be
podcast
another.
in itself. It's
That could
worthy
be a
of a
podcast.
podcast.
You
Yeah.
know, I think
Marco, sorry, Rafael, Marco. That's
one
where
last thing.
we are working on tourism. That's a separate project we have. We didn't really share with the viewers, but we are trying to bring people to Israel, as in organizing excursions. So that's on the pipeline. Of course, we are not going to change, the the human history, the two of us, but we are playing a role on this. So Marco, I think you as a licensed tour guide, you have been around the block for some time, and maybe you can see some potential when it comes to promoting Israel as a destination.
Absolutely. Israel is quite unique. And the interesting thing is that when people come here, their perceptions do change,
Yes.
especially when people go out of their way and they're not shy to speak about even some unpleasant truths. But people's perceptions do change. They see a different reality. They see how it has been misrepresented. And they understand things about their own societies as well, because here they see a society which is cohesive, which has a sense of identity, which has a sense of purpose, which has a national project, things which in many countries in Europe don't exist anymore, especially when you think that the natality rate in Europe has gone down significantly. And the demographics are changing as a result. And the whole concept of the nation state is dissolving. Here they see the opposite.
I just want to point out that my whole journey started by going to Israel. I don't think I would have.
I was your guide. Tell people.
I wish I could, but I didn't know you back then.
If you will it, it is no dream. Somebody said that before.
Somebody, yes, but really, I actually the best Hasbara would be that to invite those professors from Ivy League colleges who are blatantly anti-Israel, and instead of the influencers who are getting their free trip to Israel, they should be getting their trip and look and check and visit the border between Gaza and Israel, visit the border between, even Egypt and Gaza, have an actual sense of the Middle East, because most of these professors were never even visiting.
You're perfectly right, because they've put up the force field to any critical sense, any capacity to analyze things. This is the tragedy of Palestinism. By the way, Palestinists have done a wonderful job in that sense. They've put the brain into shutdown of many of these people.
Rafael,
so I'd like to say two last things. You were saying about the professors. I'm afraid it wouldn't work, because intelligence is a two-edged sword. You can use it to understand reality better, or you can use it to deceive yourself better. And these professors, even if you showed them all the beautiful things of Israel and all the horrible things of Hamas, they would still blame the Zionists for having done everything.
This is tricky, Daniela. I have hope, because I know how much I've changed by being there. So I feel like there is still hope. And if you bring there 10 and only one will start questioning things, I'm all for it.
But you're right, Virág, but you were young. But a professor will only change his mind when his wallet makes him change his mind. So you have to start cutting the faucet and the funding from all these departments that foment American, anti-Western, anti-Zionist ideology, because then, believe me, intellectuals are very flexible at upgrading their ideas to make sure they match with their financial interests. And secondly, I would like to ask Daniela's opinion about this. At this point, I think it's more than clear that there are many spheres connected to the PR and propaganda, where the Arabs are better than Jews, and we just have to accept the fact very humbly. There's something very hard, especially for Israelis, to accept that Arabs can be smarter than Jews.
I think they just have more money and more people. I don't think in some places, they're smarter than us. You can't win all the fronts. This front we lost. But for me, the most important thing is that military-wise, that we win. We're alive.
Yeah.
Iran didn't
But
win. The Palestinians didn't win. Syria didn't win.
Hasbara,
Lebanon didn't win.
Hasbara is war by other means, let's say.
Exactly. As I said at the beginning, it is a front that Israel just neglected. And I do believe that when Israel will start perceiving it as a front and putting the right resources into it in the hands of the right people and actually putting a strategy behind it, then we might see a beginning of a change. Will it be immediately? No. Look how much money and effort has been invested into this in the last 20 years. So we're way back in the race. But we may start seeing a change when Israel will be wise enough to understand that this is the front that we neglected. Because look at the fronts we haven't neglected. Look at Iran, look at Lebanon, look at Syria. These are fronts we haven't neglected. Look at the front we have neglected, Gaza. The 7th of October, that's what happens when we neglect fronts. And we also have neglected the advocacy front or the cognitive war front. And that has to change in order for us. I don't think we'll convince the entire world. I really don't think so. But if we manage to convince another 10%, that's amazing. That's the beginning. That's good. And we have to think about that step by step by step. I do also agree with you that if we cut the funds, then we'll see changes in minds. But I also think that it takes a very big man to admit that his entire career was wrong or everything he wrote was wrong his entire life. So even if we cut the funds, I do think it will be a very big step for them to say, oh, I was wrong for 20 years. And I don't think that will be a big thing that will be happening, but I hope
you raise a
not.
very good point. You raise a very, because it goes even beyond that. They have constructed their whole identity, their whole persona around this. That's a very insightful observation.
But I mean,
yeah.
Virág, would you mind calling a Uber taxi driven by one call, for example?
Say again?
Or would you mind calling a taxi cab where the driver is one call, or one of these professors who are specialized in hating Israel? They can always become taxi drivers.
No, but I actually would want to have a drive with them. You don't know, because I have not yet posted about that, even though it was 2 years ago. Once I sat with a guy from Gaza for 3 hours in the car, and you could cut the air between us because the distance between what we believed in was so strong. And yet we tried. I lived in Boulder, and he happened to be my neighbor. He's a very handsome guy, and it's a whole twisted story because back then I had no partner and we were like flirting and we didn't know about each other. And then he said he's from Gaza, and I was like, God, you're really funny. The only handsome guy in Boulder who is straight is like from Gaza. And then he learns about my work, and then he becomes like this. And I give him a book that I asked him to read. I think he tried. Anyway, I'm not going to disclose his story, but he's here on asylum because he had to leave Gaza for various reasons. To cut the story short, we were sitting there for 3 hours, and regardless of the fact that he was harmed by Hamas, he still sided with Hamas. He still felt that Israel was the enemy. And I was like, how can you come back from this? It's like we are all the product of our own environment. It's not for nothing that there are examples on a different side that Iranian people who immigrate to the US as kids, they grow up with a love towards America and Israel. If they would have stayed in Iran, they would join the people who are burning the flag of these two countries. So your environment, where you grow up, the impulses you get has such a big impact on your life. So I do want to spend with these professors, a couple of hours in the car and just see why they think the way they think, because then you can have a dialogue. And I always say that we don't need to agree on everything. My baseline to continue a conversation is that we can agree on the fact that Hamas is a terrorist organization. As if someone can't even get to that level, we're never going to agree until this is the point. If that is a common denomination, we can get somewhere.
I think it's extremely difficult also to change how Gazans and also Palestinians from Judea and Samaria think, because their education from a small age, if you look at the UNRWA textbooks, it's completely anti-Semitic. And if you grow up believing that, and that's all you hear from your teachers and from your books, taking that out or reshaping or realizing that that wasn't true takes a lot of time and energy and education that people aren't exposed to. And then think about exactly what you say. They learn that in their textbooks as they grow up, and then they go to the universities, Western universities sometimes, that absolutely echo what they learned when they were young. I don't know if to that extreme, because sometimes in the textbooks you have math equations showing how much Jews you can kill. Okay, so I don't think it's to that extent in the Western countries, in Colombia and in other universities, but there is anti-Semitism, and it's echoed by Westerners. So if you learn about it when you're young and then you hear it again in universities, you will believe it, and it will be very difficult to change.
I want to add one word, because to a smaller extent, that was my journey. You know, I grew up with an anti-Semitic sentiment in my environment. I was pre-internet, so I only knew what was in my proxy, the Jewish jokes. You need a big amount of bravery to look into the mirror and ask yourself, why the hell was I holding this anti-Semitic views? Have I even met a Jew before? It's like, who taught me that? My family, society, school, whatnot. I think today it's a little bit even harder for the reasons you mentioned, and social media adding to that. But people can only change if they have the bravery to look into themselves and say, okay, I was misled, or let's go for ground zero and let's re-educate myself on my own terms, not, what is being given to me from various sources. But yeah.
I'll just add to what you say. My grandmother, she was Christian from Italy. From Pieve Bracciano, next to Arezzo. She saved Jews in the Holocaust. And she was surrounded by people, not all, that were obviously not on that side. The Germans used their houses there as headquarters, and yet there were people that said no. And it's the same as you standing up and saying no. There is a different story, there is a different side, and I'm willing to open my heart and my ears to this story and to the truth, basically, and to stand for what I believe is the right path to go in. I think it's true then in the 30s, and I think it's true now. And thank God to those people, to people like you, that the truth will survive, or I at least hope it will survive. It survived then during the Holocaust, and I hope it will also survive now through these horrible anti-Semitic times.
Yeah.
Daniela, I think we need to rebrand Hasbara. Do you think that the Israeli government and leaders would take the task of basically presenting Israel's position and building empathy in the world more if instead of calling it Hasbara, we rebranded it as the Seventh Front, Hazita Shibi?
Well, that means that you have to shift the responsibility for the cognitive efforts to the military. Now it's under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that's a huge fight. There's a huge fight also in the American system. Well, no, I don't think the thing is, I just don't think it will happen. Even though I wish it would happen, because I do think it will function better under the military, because that's how our enemies are operating, and it's going quite well for them. And I do think that's the effort that is needed. I don't think Israel will get to the terms in which it will manage to move the budget and the responsibility to the military, because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is going to fight back on that. This is also actually sort of a conflict that's embedded in also the American system, where there's clashes between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense, and the same is in Israel. So even if we brand it that way, Israel has to decide it's a military problem and invest as it invests in the military, in a military issue as a front. Without that, without us solving our internal conflict here, it just won't happen. But I love the name. I agree with the name. I think it's absolutely right. If it will affect anything, only if we deal with our problems and conflicts internally.
Yalla, Daniela, we need you in the Knesset.
I love my life. I don't want to go there. That's destroying my life completely.
I hope not, Daniela, because I wanted to invest in that platform for writing. I'm waiting to get in and down the road make some money. So please, Rafael, don't divert Daniela from her venture, please. Don't do that. Don't do that. Maybe later. And I will put an end to this conversation. I think we could be here forever, but for the interest of time, someone needs to put an end. So I want to thank you, all of you, that joined us tonight. Virág, Rafael, Daniela. So thank you very much for your insights. They were powerful. So you're always welcome to return to these sessions. We do it on a Wednesday basis. So every Wednesday, so every week, usually on Wednesdays. Sometimes there are exceptions for personal circumstances, but typically Wednesday around the same time. So you're always welcome to join us. We do one on Hungary, Virág. Here's my promise to you. We do one on Hungary. So before the elections in April, we do.
Yes, and I have a special announcement for viewers. If they're in Berlin, a small beer is on me. For the participants of the session, a big beer is on me. Okay.
A what? A small beer? I don't go to Berlin for a small beer.
For viewers.
I go for a big one.
Yeah, you a big one. The viewers a small one.
Okay. I live in Ireland. Beer is a serious thing, So you cannot offer me a small beer. For the viewers, I want also to send my gratitude to stay with us for the conversations. If you enjoy, make sure to press the like button below. If you know someone who's into this conversation and haven't watched, make sure to share. And if you haven't subscribed, it's okay. The subscribe button is still there for you to subscribe and be aware of the further conversation. So thanks again, and I see you very soon. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Take care.
My email is there. If you're in Berlin, let me know. And as I said, small beer for the viewers, big beer for the podcast participants.
Great.
Bye. Thank
you. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.